Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Cat's Track. We post an interview with an amazing Canadian each weekday for your daily inspiration. Today, I would like to introduce you to my friend, Kelsey Hahn. Kelsey was born in Regina, came from farming families on both sides, and moved to Alberta in 2013. She and her husband have a very active and rambunctious 3-year-old daughter, and she is Kelsey's non-work related real-life psych experiment. So funny. As you will see in Kelsey's bio attached, she is deeply passionate about her job and elevating the way that work is viewed in the world, moving it from the have to column to the want to. She believes that we shouldn't think solely about work as a means to live our real lives. And with strong leadership in teams, she believes that organizations can give that experience to their employees. Kelsey's foundation and background to organizational leadership and psychology is grounded in her experiences as a high-performance athlete, and she is fascinated by the ways in which organizations can leverage learnings from sport. Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Catherine.
May we start with the questions that I sent you?
That would be great.
Awesome.
It's an honor to be chatting with you today.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So well, let's jump in. So the first question you had asked me is, what has been one of my greatest challenges over the past 2 months? And I've thought a lot about it. I'm a big extrovert. So I actually didn't realize how much of an extrovert I was until the pandemic. I always somewhat described myself as an introvert, extrovert. And now there's a lot of literature and research coming out, talking about how challenging this has been for extroverts. And so a lot of my perspectives through all of this have really been grounded in, what has been the experience for leaders and how are leaders kind of coping and managing with their teams through all of this. And so certainly for me as an extrovert, it's been a lot of learnings and, how am I coaching and leading my team who might be a group of introverts or other extroverts. So how are we giving them kind of that space and opportunity to still have those kind of energetic, engaging experiences with other people, mind you, virtually. So that's kind of been a big learning. But I think one of the most kind of profound experiences I've had has been around reflecting on we've all had time to move slower and reflect on our lives and what we want to do. And for some of us, maybe work stopped. Maybe some people were laid off. Maybe some people work scaled up. And so I think that it's a really good time to just kind of hit the reset and go, what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? I've thought about it, you referenced my daughter in the opening there. And I think, as a 3-year-old, she runs around all the time and she's so excited and her little personality is blossoming now. And you look at them and the children of yours, and you say, wow, I wonder what they're going to be and what they're going to grow up to do and, what she's going to be, gravitate towards in terms of her interests. And I thought about it more and more and more. And I think to myself, I'm not so concerned with what she'll grow up to be, but rather who she's going to be. I want her to be confident and strong and hardworking and kind. And so applying that to my own leadership style and the leaders we work with, I've thought to myself, I think that during this time, it's really important for leaders to reflect, not on, what you want to do or what you're going to accomplish, but really who you want to be and how you want to show up. And for me, that's really translated into, the kind of person I want to be, the people I want to work with, and certainly the people that I want to develop on my team and, the model I want to set for them. So
I love it.
Yeah, that's been kind of one of my big learnings. Of course, there's certainly been learnings around how do we challenge ourselves to think creatively, think differently. We can't do business development the same. We're not networking the same way. So just really kind of challenging my team to get creative and innovative and push their skill sets. Lastly, I think I would be remiss if, I didn't mention all the other things we do in our research institute, all the work that we do with Mac Van Wielingen, supporting his Canadian energy advocacy and the little tour he's on, big tour, I should say, and just kind of the general promotion of Canada's interests and the role of business in society. So obviously that in and of itself has been a big challenge through all of this.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
so
the next piece, where it's the 3 things that you want to share with everyone.
yeah, so the 3 things, and again, all of my perspectives are really grounded in kind of, leadership perspectives and what we've either seen in our clients or seen in those that we work with or in our own team. So the first one, and I wrote about this really, really early on in the pandemic, was the importance of leadership empathy. I think that what's really important to remember as leaders is that people at the top are going to experience a crisis like this really differently than people on the front line. Research from past crises and pandemics has shown that income inequality really shows through in a pandemic. So people on the front line are going to experience it differently because, they may not be able to make the decision around isolating themselves to forego wages, particularly in the case of this COVID-19. So I think what's really important for leaders to remember through all of this is just the importance of truly expressing empathy, and empathy being different than kindness or pity. So actually being able to put yourself into the shoes of another person and set policies and change your behavior and adapt to really what your employees need, not because you're being kind or acting out of what you think is best. It's truly being able to put yourselves in their experiences. And secondly, on the line of empathy, it's about not changing, not changing the level of leadership that your team gets from you. And I always talk about that being kind of the burden of leadership, which is twofold. It's rising above your own experience to provide exceptional leadership to your team, but then also being able to challenge your employees in a different way and show up for them. And that's kind of your challenge in leading your organization through uncertainty. The level of leadership that they get shouldn't change based on what you're experiencing. And the second one that I wanted to talk about, which is somewhat related, is resilience and grit. And so this is something that we've talked a lot about, and it's been talked about a lot. Angela Duckworth, she's a researcher out of Wharton, and she has done a ton of research on grit. And I think people are talking more and more about resilience, and certainly like organizational resilience. But again, I kind of think about it at the leadership level, and what does that mean for individual employees, and how you're coaching and supporting your organization or your employees in building resilience. Certainly stress and leadership are inextricably linked during times of crisis. And for me, it's been really interesting to observe, how stress has shown up in myself, how stress shows up in leaders, and then how people are coping, how they've used this time to either, I think, dig in and become grittier, as the term that Angela Duckworth uses, or I guess kind of fold. And so, resilience is really about a state of mind. It's how do we adapt positively to really negative experiences. Friedrich Nietzsche, I can never say his name properly, but he was the German philosopher. He said that those who have a why can bear almost any how. And so I think that what I've really called this is the people that are most resilient have been those that have been able to connect their work and everything that they're doing to some sort of bigger purpose. They love their work, and they've been able to kind of see a path through to understand how everything that they're doing contributes to some sort of bigger purpose. And for leaders, that's really important for us to bring out and hold our employees accountable to that. And I've noticed that in people who, and maybe some of us see it around our work, but those that aren't truly engaged, I think, are struggling right now because they're seeing their motivation wane, and they're, experiencing kind of highs and lows, and the wonderfulness of working at home has kind of weared off. And so it's about what's kind of truly getting you through and pulling your motivation and your engagement and everything.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing that I wanted to talk about, which is for me the most important and kind of influential piece in all this, was the importance of personal discovery and growth in all times in life. Mike Tyson has this quote, and I always use sports analogies for a lot of things, but Mike Tyson has this quote that I love, where he says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Hmm.
And I think that that's so apt for what we're all experiencing right now and what we have experienced, right? It's, you thought you were a good leader, you thought you had a great organization, people talk about having a great culture, and then boom, pandemic. So I think that's where a lot of leaders found themselves. And I, in particular, I don't know if you're familiar with the Michael Jordan documentary on Netflix that came out, I think it launched in March, but it was called The Last Dance, and I'm sure a lot of people had a chance to watch it. But it was kind of this amazing kind of biography of the one of their final seasons, the 1997-98 championship season. And I still to this day don't really follow NBA or basketball very closely, but I was fascinated by what I didn't really truly understand about Michael Jordan. And he had this insane commitment to excellence and kind of winning at all costs. And he took a lot of heat for it. Like there's been a lot of media around it coming out around how he was a toxic leader. And so I'll put that aside. But the part that I found really unique was that he almost had this aversion to failure and complacency. And Phil Jackson was the coach of that team. And I pulled out this quote that I've been using and talking to leaders about through all this, but he says, we would say on our team, you're only successful at the moment you perform a successful act. You have to do it again and again and again. And so again, I think that's so important for what organizations and leaders are experiencing right now. And the way through it, in particular for leaders, is to dig in and figure out, how do I get better and how do I push my team to keep getting better? And I think, it's a lot of people talk about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And that's where we are right now. And so I think when, people always ask me about what is leadership of the future, and what will leaders, what's kind of the key skill that we want to look for in leaders and develop. And I think it's adaptability. It's a learning orientation to continuously commit to growth and improvement. And it ties in with self-awareness, which has kind of been described as the meta skill of the 21st century, because it really underpins almost every single successful leadership behavior, from empathy to persuasion to influence to communication. But I would take it one step further and say it's strategic self-awareness and a commitment to a learning orientation. Because when you ask someone, well, how do we prepare leaders for the future? I think that if it's always grounded in the value and the mindset of, I don't know, but I'll figure it out, I think you're going to be successful. We have a leadership assessment that we use with clients that we call it the leadership vigilance profile. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do is pull out and engage people in strategic self-awareness. With everyone that we've ever worked with, we find that 90% of people vastly overestimate their abilities. And so that's just true across the board. Everybody kind of has this tendency to, talk about self-awareness and being self-aware, but they don't really truly achieve it. And so, I think it's one of those interesting things that if it was, there's a researcher named Tasha Eurich who has expertise in this space, and she says that if it was anything else in our world, we'd want to know all about it, from who's visiting our social media page to our bank account statements. But something about, knowing and understanding ourselves truly and deeply, we shy away from it. And again, it's almost like an aversion or fear of the truth. So I think for leaders, it's about really digging in and getting uncomfortable with the things you don't like about yourself. And, we're 3 or 4 months, into this, but really being able to use this time to learn more about yourself and continue in your own growth. So those were kind of my 3 big insights.
Thank you, Kelsey. I've got an additional question, if you don't mind, before we move on to the last piece.
Yeah.
With all of your leadership training ability and all the things that you're doing with your clients, I'm curious as to what's the discussion been around what can leaders do when it comes to the mental health piece for their employees and their contractors? What some of those discussions look like?
So that's an interesting question. And I think it ties back to my point around resilience. And I'll actually get into it when we talk about kind of what I see as what's next for the workplace and leadership. But I think that it's that resilience piece that's really important. Resilience research shows that there's kind of like 5 key ways we can build real resilience in not only ourselves but in our employees. So it's having a positive and realistic outlook. I wrote some of them down. A moral compass. Having a moral compass, being able to actually accept the things that you can't change, but then, putting your energy towards things you can control. Of course, having a support system, that's a big one. So being able to rely on people around you, including within your organization. And lastly, and most importantly, the one I talked about having a bigger meaning, purpose, and just true engagement in your job. And when you can connect that, when people are able to see that and connect that in what they're doing, like Nietzsche says, you can almost bear any how.
I love it. Good. Very wise. Thank you so much. And your last piece.
Yeah. So, you asked a couple questions there, but the one that stuck out to me was, what do you see as a what's next opportunity for the world? And I thought about a couple things, but when I think about kind of post-pandemic success and the organizations and the leaders that are going to come out of this in a better place, I think it's going to be the ones that are able to embrace transformation and use adversity as a competitive advantage. I think that the companies who are going to reimagine their businesses, engage in strategic renewal, revisioning, potentially their business models, how they compete, how they attract new opportunities, those are the ones that are going to succeed. And there's lots of research from former recessions and crises that actually has proven this, that the companies that dig in, change their business models, and not only invest in defensive strategies, but also invest in offensive strategies around R&D, leadership development, those are the ones, the very select few group of ones that are going to survive and potentially even grow through crises. But a couple things that I think are going to be really important in organizations of the future. One is, and something I've thought a lot about and we've heard a lot about through clients that are, struggling, I would say, to manage employees remotely. And it's this view that productivity, I don't think going forward is going to necessarily be our best measurement of performance.
Yeah.
And not what we should be necessarily always benchmarking our employees' work to in their performance. So, time is a very easy metric to measure performance, but we know, and years of research has shown that it's not a great marker of what someone can actually achieve.
Yeah.
So, we want to encourage people to work smarter and harder, not longer.
Yeah.
And I think what, in part with this is this old view of leadership, command and control leadership is going out the window. We're no longer able to micromanage in the way that probably some of us have even maybe reverted to in this pandemic. Like some of us under stress probably even said to ourselves, I feel like I need to micromanage more. I need to see people more because I don't know what they're doing. And that's okay. But I think that in terms of, feeling that and experiencing that, but for, as we move forward in this, it's not going to become the normal. There's no management by walking around. And so we have to throw that out the window. And I think that we're going to get more comfortable with kind of real-time performance monitoring systems, obviously all this new technology that we're using. So I think we're going to see a lot of kind of dashboards and data come up, things that are really trying to tap into experience data. So, and not just operational data. So getting more at the why versus the how of performance again. And the second thing that I've really noticed is that, and I've talked to a lot of people about, is the opportunity for talent. So, now that talent is essentially fair game globally, I think that we're going to have to, as leaders, we're going to have to compete more on talent and on our people. And, now it's not just about getting the best talent in your, in the city that you live in, it's getting the best talent for the job, period. And really, I think we're going to start to see that. Like, why wouldn't we consider hiring and onboarding someone who lives across the globe?
Yeah.
further, on that, I think that we're also going to start to see companies become more global in their orientation around collaboration and innovation. And maybe you've seen this, Catherine, with some of your clients or people you've talked to, but it's amazing the way that we're now able to connect virtually with people, and it's becoming very accepted to reach out, set up a face call or a video call, and learn about someone's organization and contemplate mergers and acquisitions, and with companies or organizations that you've never met in person, you may never meet in person, and so I just think there's going to be a world of opportunity. But the point on talent that I think has been really interesting to me, and it ties back to everything that I've said, is that I think we're going to start to see what I would hope is that people are going to start moving into positions that they really love, and connecting themselves to their passion and what they really want to do. And I think we're going to have more opportunity to do that. And the beauty of that for a leader is that that's kind of the best case scenario. So when someone loves their job, inevitably you're going to have, there's less oversight. You're not going to have to micromanage them. And these employees are the ones that are the most engaged. They're motivated. They show up with all of that, wonderful discretionary, positive behavior, and they're autonomous. And like I said, they're self-motivated. So, and usually they're also some of the most talented people because they love what they do. It goes back to that Michael Jordan. They're internally motivated to just continuously get better in what they do. So, I think that, the last example I was thinking about was, I heard this in relation to this Michael Jordan documentary. Jerry Seinfeld was on the Howard Stern show.
Okay.
A couple months ago, I think. And they were talking about Michael Jordan, and Howard Stern had kind of given him this, he was talking through it, and he said, yeah, like one of the things that I've really reflected on is that you can will yourself. You can will yourself to be really good at something. And Howard Stern said, that's why I think I've been really successful in radio, because I wanted it bad enough and I just willed myself to be the best. I worked harder than everyone else. I worked smarter, and my will prevailed. And it was the best thing. I encourage everyone to listen to it. Find it on, I think it was on Twitter, it was posted. But Jerry Seinfeld challenges him, and he goes, I'm going to shift your perspective. It actually wasn't will that you were using, it was love. And he said, what you use and what Michael Jordan uses and what I use is love. And I'll actually read the quote because it's awesome. But he says, when you love something, it's a bottomless pool of energy. That's where your energy comes from. You have to love it sincerely. He said, not because you're going to make money from it, or not because you're going to be famous or get whatever you want, but because you really love it. And he says, will is like not eating a dessert, saying like, I'm going to push away from that chocolate cake tonight. And he says, that's just forcing yourself to do something. So will is like, it's kind of the opposite. He says, you can't force yourself to be what you've made yourself into. You can love it. And he says, love is endless and will is finite.
Wow.
And I know it was just like, it was the best kind of way to interpret all of this for me. And I know it seems strange to kind of pull it back to work, but I think that's, if I was a leader, those are the kind of people I want to find in my team. I want to find the people that truly love what they do, and are going to kind of be continuously engaged in this process of making themselves better. It's ultimately going to lead to better organizational performance over the long term.
I agree with you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to go check it out.
Yeah, it's great. Jerry Seinfeld says it way better than I do. So.
Oh, I don't know. You captured it. And it's obvious to me that you love what you do, Kelsey.
Yeah, no, I really do. I'm very lucky.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you a very happy Canada Day.
Thank you very much for having me, Catherine.
Thank you. Everybody, that was Kelsey Hahn. Thank you so much for joining us today on Cat's Track, and happy Canada Day.